Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was reborn in Demon Slayer and got married to Mitsuri, Shinobu, and Kanao? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Fox on Fujikasane Mountain. The air on Fujikasane Mountain tasted of purple. It was a cloying, sweet perfume that clung to the back of the throat, a beautiful poison meant to keep monsters in and children safe. To the 30 or so trembling applicants gathered at the mountain's base, it felt less like a shield and more like the inside of a tomb. Fear was a scent all its own, sharp and sour, and it cut through the wisteria's fragrance like vinegar. Among them stood a boy who was an island of calm in a sea of anxiety. He was perhaps 15, maybe 16, with hair the color of sun-scorched wheat and eyes a startling, piercing blue. 3 faint, whisker-like marks adorned each of his cheeks, giving his otherwise handsome face a feral, fox-like cast. He wore the simple, practical clothing of a traveler, dark trousers, a sturdy blue tunic, but the weapon at his side was what drew the eye. It was a Nichiren blade, but its sheath was plain, unadorned wood, and the hilt was wrapped in simple white cloth. It looked less like the prized possession of a future slayer and more like a tool he'd picked up along the way. He wasn't looking at the twin girls with their unnerving, monotone voices who were explaining the rules of the final selection. He'd heard them well enough. Survive for 7 days on a mountain infested with demons. A simple premise with a fatal conclusion for most. Instead, his gaze swept over the other candidates. He saw the bravado masking terror in a boy with a boar's head mask. He saw the rigid, over-practiced stances of others who came from families with a legacy to uphold. He saw the raw, shivering panic in a yellow-haired boy who looked moments from collapsing. And he saw her. She stood apart, a girl with dark hair tied in a side ponytail, secured by a delicate butterfly ornament. Her expression was a perfect, placid blank. She was holding a small copper coin between her thumb and forefinger, her gaze fixed on it as if it held the secrets of the universe. There was a stillness about her that was different from his own. His was the calm of a deep river, full of power and awareness. Hers was the stillness of a doll, waiting for a hand to move it. His name, in this life, was Naruto. It was the only thing he'd been found with, a carving on a small wooden token clutched in his infant hand in the smoldering ruins of a village no one had ever heard of. He remembered flashes of another life, a burning rage, an unbreakable bond, a loneliness so vast it felt like drowning, and a power like a star chained inside his chest. The memories were ghosts, shaping his instincts without providing a clear past. He knew how to fight. He knew how to sense the emotions of others, the life energy that flowed through the world. And he knew, with an unshakable certainty, that his purpose was to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The Ubuyashiki girls finished their speech. Then, "We wish you luck." The words hung in the air, and with a silent, collective shudder, the applicants dispersed into the twilight woods. The wisteria canopy thinned almost immediately, and the oppressive silence of the safe zone was replaced by the rustling, predatory sounds of the true mountain. Naruto moved with an easy, ground-eating lope. He didn't run. He didn't sneak. He simply walked, his senses spread out like a net. He could feel them, the twisted, hungry knots of energy that were demons. They were dissonant chords in the world's natural song. The first scream of the night came within minutes. It was cut short with a wet, tearing sound. Naruto's head snapped in that direction. He was already moving, a blue and gold blur under the moonlight. He arrived to a scene of carnage. A hulking, 6-armed demon was holding a boy aloft by his head, its claws digging into his skull. 2 other candidates lay on the ground, one clearly dead, the other bleeding out. The demon cackled, its voice like grinding stones. More fresh meat. The first meal is always the sweetest. 2 other boys, trembling, held their swords with white-knuckled grips. Water breathing, second form. One of them started, his voice cracking. He never finished. The demon swatted him aside with a backhand, sending him crashing through a tree. Naruto didn't announce himself. One moment he was at the edge of the clearing, the next he was airborne. He didn't use a recognizable form. His sword remained sheathed. He simply drew his right fist back, and a sphere of swirling, golden energy materialized around it. It wasn't silent. It shrieked like a miniature typhoon, a maelstrom of pure, concentrated power. The demon's head whipped around, its 6 eyes widening in shock. It had no time to react. Rasengan, Naruto whispered, the name a phantom on his tongue from a life he couldn't quite recall. The impact wasn't a cut, it was a detonation. The golden sphere struck the demon's torso, and for a split second, there was no sound. Then the world erupted. The demon's entire upper body was obliterated, ground into nothingness by the spiraling force. The resulting shockwave tore up the earth and sent a gale of wind howling through the trees, shredding leaves and kicking up a cloud of dust. The demon's lower half crumbled to ash before it even hit the ground. Silence descended, thick and absolute. The 2 conscious survivors stared, not at the dissipating dust where the demon had been, but at Naruto. He stood over the dying candidate he'd arrived too late to save, his hand resting gently on the boy's chest. "It's over," Naruto said softly, his voice imbued with a strange, calming energy. "You can rest." The boy's frantic breathing eased. His eyes, wide with pain and terror, found Naruto's. A single tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek, and then he was still. Naruto rose, his expression unreadable. The golden energy around his hand had vanished. He looked at the 2 survivors who were gaping at him, their swords forgotten. One of them finally found his voice. What was that? What breathing style was that?" "It wasn't," Naruto replied simply, turning to walk away. "Stay close to the wisteria if you're scared. The sun will rise in a few hours." He didn't wait for a response. Melting back into the shadows, he left behind a legend that would be whispered in hushed, terrified tones for the next 7 days. The story of a fox-faced boy who wielded a hurricane in his palm. The 3rd night bled into the 4th. The number of applicants had dwindled alarmingly. The mountain was a charnel house, and the surviving candidates moved in tight, paranoid clusters. Naruto remained alone. He moved with a purpose, not just surviving, but hunting. His senses were a far more effective tool than sight or sound. He could feel the malevolent signatures of the demons and moved to intercept them, cutting them down with a brutal, almost ballistic efficiency. Sometimes he used his sword. His style was self-taught, a whirlwind of instinct and power. He didn't call out forms, he simply moved. His blade a silver extension of his will. He'd sever a neck with the same dispassionate grace he'd used to gut a fish. But for the more powerful demons, the ones that had consumed dozens of humans, he would use that power. A fist wreathed in roaring gold. A spear of shimmering energy that lanced through the air. A shockwave that pulsed from his body, staggering nearby foes. He called it his ki. The life force that burned within him, a sun he could shape to his will. He saw the girl with the butterfly ornament again. Kanao Suyuri. She fought with the detached grace of a falling leaf. Her flower breathing a beautiful, deadly art. She was incredibly skilled, a prodigy. But every single decision, from which demon to engage to which direction to move, was preceded by the glint of a copper coin flipping in the air. He watched her from the high branches of a cypress tree. A demon lunged at her from the side. She was already engaged with another. Without hesitation, her free hand went for the coin. Heads. She disengaged, sidestepped, and decapitated the new threat in one fluid motion. It was flawless. It was also deeply, profoundly wrong. Her life was a hostage to chance. Later that night, he encountered something new. It was a demon, but it felt hollow. Its energy signature was frayed, staticky. It was hunched over the corpse of another applicant, but it wasn't feeding. It was just touching the body with a long, skeletal finger, tracing patterns on the ground. The creature was gaunt, its skin stretched tight over its bones, its eyes not burning with hate but glowing with a dim, listless light. Naruto dropped to the ground, his footsteps silent. The demon's head snapped up. It didn't hiss or roar. It just stared. "You, shine," it rasped. Its voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "Too bright. The hungry star. It hates the bright ones." "What star?" Naruto asked, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The demon just shook its head, a slow, creaking motion. "The sky will be silent. Empty. Blissful. He will eat the noise. He will eat the light. He will eat the king of bugs and the lord of the sun." Before Naruto could press further, the demon lunged. It was fast, but its movements were erratic, desperate. Naruto's blade was faster. The Nichiren steel sliced through its neck cleanly. He expected the usual crumble into ash. The stench of burning demonic flesh. It didn't happen. The demon's body convulsed, and it began to dissolve not into ash, but into a thick, black, oily ichor. It sizzled as it touched the ground, eating away at the grass and soil, leaving behind a patch of dead, sterile earth. The air grew cold, a profound, unnatural chill that had nothing to do with the night. Naruto knelt, his fingers hovering over the blighted patch. His sensory ability recoiled. Where the demon had perished, there was a void. Not just an absence of demonic energy, but an absence of all energy. It was a hole in the world. The hungry star, he murmured. His brow furrowed. This was a threat he didn't understand, a piece of a puzzle he didn't know he was solving. It felt older, and somehow more fundamental, than the existence of the demons he'd been fighting. Dawn on the 6th day. Only a handful of candidates remained. The weak and the unlucky were gone. The survivors were skilled, hardened, or in the case of the perpetually terrified Zenitsu, impossibly fortunate. The atmosphere was thick with exhaustion and the looming promise of survival. Just one more day, one more night. It was then that the mountain decided to offer up its true master. It rose from the earth in the center of a wide clearing, a grotesque amalgamation of flesh and limbs. It was a morphed demon, its body a tumorous mass of arms and faces. The agonized visages of the slayers it had consumed over decades trapped on its surface. It was a monster from the time of the first final selections, a creature of legend among the captured demons. Several slayers were already engaged. The boy with the boar mask, Inosuke, was a whirlwind of two blades, his beast breathing a chaotic, unpredictable assault. But his swords just scraped against the demon's unnaturally tough hide. Zenitsu was on the ground, seemingly asleep, but crackling with latent yellow electricity, a storm waiting to be unleashed. And Kanao was there. She moved with an ethereal beauty, her flower-breathing forms deflecting the dozens of arms that lashed out at her. She was a butterfly dancing on the edge of a typhoon, untouchable. But she wasn't making any progress. She was surviving, not winning. For every arm she dodged, 3 more took its place. Naruto watched from a distance, his analytical gaze breaking down the fight. The demon was too large, its hide too thick. Frontal assaults were useless. Its weak point had to be the neck, but it was buried deep within the writhing mass of limbs, protected by a near impenetrable defense. Kanao was pushed back, her flawless footwork faltering for the first time. An arm snaked through her guard, faster than the others, and slammed into her side. She was thrown through the air, crashing against a tree with a sickening thud. She crumpled to the ground, her sword clattering from her grasp. The giant demon loomed over her, a dozen arms reaching to crush her. Her hand, trembling, went for her coin. It was an instinct, a prayer to the god of chance. No, the voice was quiet but carried with absolute authority. Naruto landed between Kanao and the demon, his back to her. He hadn't drawn his sword. He simply stood there, a lone figure against a mountain of flesh. The demon roared, a cacophony of stolen voices. Another morsel, a bright, juicy one. I'll add your face to my collection. A forest of arms descended, aiming to pulverize him. Naruto took a deep, steadying breath. He channeled his ki, not into a focused point like the Rasengan, but throughout his entire body. The air around him shimmered with golden light. He didn't try to dodge. He met the assault head-on. He moved. It was a dance of brutal redirection. An arm that came to crush him was caught, twisted, and used as a bludgeon against another. A limb that tried to impale him was met with an open palm strike that shattered bone from the inside out. He flowed through the storm of attacks, a leaf in a hurricane that somehow remained untouched. His movements were fluid, economical, and devastatingly powerful. He was dismantling the creature's primary weapon, its overwhelming numbers, limb by limb. He broke through the wall of arms and stood at the base of the creature's true body. He slammed his palm against its fleshy torso. It wasn't a Rasengan, but a pulse of pure ki. Hake Kusho. The name was another ghost word, but the technique was real. A powerful, invisible shockwave erupted from his hand, blasting a hole clear through the demon's midsection. The monster shrieked, stumbling back, its regeneration kicking in but struggling against the sheer destructive force. For the first time in 50 years, it felt fear. Naruto turned his head slightly, his piercing blue eyes finding Kanao's. She was staring at him, her placid mask broken by a sliver of shock and confusion. Her sword lay a few feet away. It's regenerating, Naruto said, his voice calm and even. Its neck is exposed. For about 3 seconds. He didn't move to finish it. He just stood there, a golden shield between her and the monster. Your sword, he said, his gaze unwavering. Your choice. The word struck her with more force than the demon's blow. Your choice. Not. Heads you fight. Tails you run. Not. Do what you are told. Not an order. Not a suggestion. A simple, profound statement of her own agency. The demon's wound was already closing. The opening was vanishing. Her hand, which had been fumbling for her coin, froze. She looked at the copper disc, then at the sword, then at the back of the boy who had just granted her a power she never knew she possessed. The power to decide for herself. In that moment, the coin meant nothing. She surged to her feet, ignoring the searing pain in her ribs. She snatched her sword, her grip sure and steady. The world narrowed to a single point, the demon's neck. Flower breathing, final form, equinoctial vermilion eye. Her vision exploded into a world of slow motion, every muscle fiber of the demon. Every twitch of its regenerating flesh, rendered in perfect clarity. The strain on her eyes was immense, the world turning blood red, but she didn't care. She moved. She was past Naruto in a flash, a pink and black blur. The demon, still reeling from Naruto's attack, couldn't track her. Her blade sang through the air, a perfect arc of silver light. It connected with the thick, gnarled neck. L screamed against unnaturally dense flesh and bone. For a heart-stopping second, it seemed the blade would not cut through. Then, with a final, desperate surge of her will, it severed. The giant head, a mess of screaming faces, tumbled from the body. The colossal form froze, then began to disintegrate into a mountain of ash. Kanao landed on the other side, her body trembling with exertion. The world swam back into normal speed, her vision blurry and aching. She stood there, panting, the sword heavy in her hand. She had done it. She had made the choice. Naruto walked over, his golden aura fading. He stopped beside her, looking at the dissipating mound of ash. He didn't praise her. He didn't scold her for her recklessness. He just nodded, a simple, affirming gesture. Good cut, he said. And then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the clearing, her heart hammering in her chest with a strange, new, and terrifying rhythm. She clutched the hilt of her sword, the feeling of the choice, her choice, still singing in her blood. The sun rose on the 7th day, its light feeling like a benediction. The 5 survivors gathered back at the clearing where it had all begun. There was Naruto, looking no worse for wear aside from some dirt on his clothes. There was the perpetually angry Inosuke, complaining loudly about his chipped blades. There was the weeping Zenitsu, clinging to his sparrow and thanking the heavens. There was a stoic boy named Genya who snarled at anyone who came near. And there was Kanao. She stood silently, as always, but something was different. She wasn't holding her coin. It was tucked away in her pocket, its cold weight a memory rather than a guide. Her gaze kept drifting to the blond boy who stood slightly apart from the others, his presence a quiet anchor of certainty. The Ubuyashiki girls appeared, their voices as serene as ever. Welcome back, and congratulations. They explained the rest of the process. The ranks, the crows, the smiths. And finally, the selection of the ore. A table was brought out, laden with hunks of dark, heavy metal. Please, choose the ore that will be used to forge your blade. The other 4 went, one by one. Inosuke grabbed 2 at random. Zenitsu was terrified of them. Genya chose a heavy, dense-looking piece. Kanao let her hand hover over them, then selected one with a calm deliberation that was entirely new. When it was Naruto's turn, he didn't look at them. He closed his eyes. He extended his hand, his senses reaching out, feeling the subtle vibration of the world within the metal. Most were dormant, solid, stable. But one thrummed with a faint, familiar warmth. It felt like a tiny, sleeping sun. It resonated with the key inside him. His fingers closed around it. It was no larger or smaller than the others. But it felt right. A Kasugai crow will be assigned to each of you now, the girls announced. A flurry of black wings descended. Crows landed on the shoulders of Inosuke, Zenitsu, and Genya, cawing loudly. Kanao's crow was quiet, simply perching on her outstretched finger. But the bird that landed on Naruto's shoulder was not a crow. It was a magnificent hawk, its feathers the color of burnished gold. Its eyes sharp and intelligent. It ruffled its wings and let out a piercing cry that silenced the other birds. The Ubuyashiki girls shared a look, a flicker of surprise in their impassive faces. A hawk was unheard of. The hawk leaned in and spoke, its voice raspy but clear. Naruto Uzumaki, head east. A town is plagued by a demon that hides in shadows. Go, Naruto. Just smiled faintly and gave the hawk's head a scratch, which it seemed to enjoy. He turned to leave, his path set. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He had survived, and now the real work could begin. Kanao watched him go, a solitary figure walking toward the rising sun. Her hand instinctively went to her pocket, her fingers brushing against the cool, smooth surface of her coin. She didn't take it out. She just watched until his bright hair disappeared over the ridge, a speck of gold against the vast, green world. For the first time in her life, she wondered where her own path would lead. And for the first time, she felt that the answer was up to her. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Poison and the Maelstrom. The path into the Jukai Valley was less a road and more a scar of packed ear. Carved through an endless sea of green. 7 years had passed since Fujikasane Mountain. 7 years of blood, battle, and an ascent through the ranks of the Demon Slayer Corps that was less a climb and more a meteoric rise. Naruto Uzumaki, once the anomalous survivor, was now the sage Hashira, the Sennin Bashira. The title was Kagaya's invention, a nod to the strange, wise beyond his years. Raw and the preternatural energy that was not quite a breathing style but something far more fundamental. He walked with the same easy, ground-eating stride he always had, his custom-forged Nichiren blade at his hip. The ore he had chosen all those years ago had produced a remarkable weapon. When inert, it was a deep, shimmering silver. But when he channeled his ki into it, the blade turned a brilliant, sun gold. Capable of withstanding the concussive force of his techniques. Beside him, moving with a lightness that barely seemed to disturb the dust, was Shinobu Kocho, the insect Hashira. She as a vision of lethal elegance in her butterfly-patterned haori, a serene smile fixed on her face. A smile that never, ever reached her violet eyes. Era, Uzumaki-san, she began, her voice a mellow dick chime that held the faintest edge of steel. You seem awfully quiet. Are you intimidated by the spooky woods? I assure you, the butterflies here are quite harmless. Naruto didn't look at her, his blue eyes scanning the oppressive canopy above. The woods aren't what's bothering me, Kocho-san. It's the silence. Silence is to be expected. The reports stated that the local populace has either fled or vanished. It's why we're here, she replied, her tone that of a patient teacher explaining a simple concept. No, Naruto said, finally turning to her. His gaze was direct, without artifice. She was an intensity Shinobu found both irritating and intriguing. Not that kind of silence. I mean the birds, the insects, the animals. It's a dead quiet. Life energy is thin here. Frightened. It feels like the whole valley is holding its breath. Shinobu tilted her head, her smile unwavering. My, what a poetic way of putting it. I prefer to rely on more tangible evidence. My Kasugai Crow report. The last confirmed demon sighting was over a month ago, yet 3 travelers and a team of lower-ranked slayers have disappeared in the last 2 weeks. The disappearances are accelerating. The pattern suggests a territorial demon. But the lack of activity is a contradiction. It's not a demon, Naruto stated with flat certainty. Shinobu's smile tightened by a fraction of a millimeter. Oh, and how did the sage Hashira come to this grand conclusion without so much as examining a footprint? Did the trees whisper it to you? He ignored the jibe. I can't feel one. Not a single one. I can feel the lingering fear, the echoes of pain. But the predator, the energy signature is wrong. It's cold and empty, not hot and hungry like a demon's. This was the core of their professional friction. Shinobu was a creature of logic, science, and meticulous deduction. She gathered data, formed hypotheses, and tested them. Naruto felt He sensed the emotional and energetic state of the world around him as easily as she might sense a change in barometric pressure. To her, it was maddeningly esoteric. To him, it was as plain as the nose on his face. An empty signature, she mused, tapping a finger on her chin. How fascinatingly vague. Well, while you are communing with the valley's feelings, I will proceed with a proper investigation. We can compare our data later. She picked up her pace, idling ahead into the first blighted village. It was a ghost town, doors swinging on creaking hinges, a half-eaten bowl of rice on a table crawling with maggots. The air was thick with the smell of decay and abandonment. Shinobu immediately went to work. She pulled a small kit from her uniform, taking samples of the soil, scraping residue from a doorway, examining the state of the local flora. Her movements were precise, economical, her mind clearly cataloging every detail. Naruto didn't follow her. He stood in the center of the deserted village square, closed his eyes, and sank into himself. He whirled dissolved into a tapestry of energy. He felt the faint, thrumming life of the grass, the deep, slow pulse of the trees, the panicked, scattered trails of the few remaining animals. And then he felt the other thing. The cold spot. It was like the memory of the demon on Fujikasane Mountain, but magnified 100-fold. It was a patch of anti-life, a void in the weave of the world. It wasn't a thing in the valley. It was a sickness of the valley. He felt the invisible lines of it spreading out like veins from a central point, a tumor of nothingness growing deep in the woods. The missing people hadn't just been killed. Their life energy had been erased. Consumed not for power, like a demon would, but simply nullified. He opened his eyes, a grim set to his jaw. He knew where they needed to go. He found Shinobu kneeling by a small, dried-up stream. She was holding a small glass vial up to the light, examining the murky water within. The water source is contaminated, she said without looking up. Not with a typical poison, however. It's inert. It seems to carry a compound that aggressively breaks down organic matter but leaves no recognizable chemical trace. Almost as if it encourages things to simply cease existing. Very peculiar. It's coming from a point about 2 miles northeast of here, Naruto said. In that direction, he pointed toward a dense, mist-shrouded ion of the forest that seemed to swallow the light. Shinobu finally stood and looked at him, wiping the vial clean with a cloth. And your feelings told you this. My senses did, he corrected gently. There's a place over there where the wrongness is strongest. It's where the cold is coming from. For a moment, she looked as if she were about to argue, to demand proof, to ridicule his methods. But something in the utter confidence of his voice gave her pause. Her own meticulous investigation pointed to an unknown contaminant originating upstream. His mystical senses pointed in the same direction. The conclusion was the same, even if the methods were polar opposites. Very well, Uzumaki-san, she sighed, tucking her kit away. Let's go see this cold place of yours. Lead the way. The trek was unnerving. The deeper they went, the more the forest changed. The birdsong had long since vanished. Now, even the drone of insects was gone. The trees grew in strange, unnatural shapes, their branches twisted as if in agony. A fine, gray mist clung to the ground, cold to the touch and smelling of ozone and dust. Shinobu's hand rested on the hilt of her unique, stinger-like sword. Her smile was gone, replaced by a look of sharp, clinical focus. The atmospheric pressure is dropping, and the air is losing humidity. It's unnatural, like a localized weather effect with no discernible cause. It's the energy void, Naruto said, his voice low. It's leaching the life and warmth out of the area. They broke through a line of sickly-looking trees and stopped dead. Before them lay a hidden settlement. It wasn't built of wood and thatch like the other villages. The structures were made of a dark, gray stone that seemed to absorb the light. Strange, spiral-like symbols were carved into the walls. Symbols that made the eyes ache to look at. The entire place was silent, devoid of any visible life. But Naruto knew they were there. He could feel them. Dozens of hollow, cold presences, hidden within the stone buildings. Stay sharp, he whispered, his body tensing. They know we're here. Shinobu drew her blade, its slender form looking more like a surgeon's tool than a weapon. Humans, she whispered back, her eyes narrowing. The energy signatures, or lack thereof, were not demonic. Yes, but something's wrong with them. The attack came without warning. Not a charge, but a coordinated ambush. Figures in dark gray robes emerged from the doorways and shadows, their faces hidden by deep hoods. They moved with a disciplined, eerie silence. They weren't armed with swords, but with strange, obsidian artifacts. Some held rods, others sickles, and a few carried ornate, jagged daggers. One of the robed figures pointed a rod at Shinobu. There was no sound, no flash of light, but the air around her suddenly grew heavy. Pressing in on her, it was a localized gravity field, designed to crush or immobilize. Insect breathing, dance of the bee sting, true flutter. Shinobu was a blur of motion, a flurry of impossible speed. She evaded the epicenter of the effect, appearing behind the cultist in an instant. Her blade darted out, aiming for the neck. A lethal, wisteria-laced sting. The cultist collapsed without a sound. Another lunged at Naruto, swinging a black sickle. Naruto didn't draw his sword. He met the attack with his bare hands. He caught the cultist's wrist, his grip like iron. The cultist grunted in pain and surprise. Naruto twisted, using the man's own momentum to spin him around, and delivered a precise, open palm strike to the back of his neck. The man went limp, unconscious but alive. This was the moral chasm between them, laid bare in the heat of battle. They were humans. To Shinobu, they were hostiles, obstacles to be removed with the same lethal efficiency she would use on a demon. The poison in her blade was just as final. To Naruto, they were still people, misguided and dangerous, but people nonetheless. Killing them was a line he would not cross unless absolutely necessary. A cultist with a dagger rushed him. The blade was coated in the same black ichor Naruto had seen on Fujikasane. It was a weapon designed to inflict that unnatural decay. Naruto sidestepped, the dagger missing him by an inch. He flicked his finger, and a compressed pellet of ki, invisible to the naked eye, shot through the air and struck the cultist's temple. The man's eyes rolled back in his head, and he crumpled. Uzumaki-san, stop playing with them. Shinobu called out, her voice sharp with annoyance. She had already dispatched 3 more attackers, her movements a beautiful, deadly dance. They are trying to kill us. They're still human. He shot back, deflecting another sickle with a ki-reinforced forearm. He spun and swept the legs out from under 2 more cultists, then delivered quick, precise chops to their collars, knocking them unconscious. He was a maelstrom of non-lethal force. He moved through the battle like a surgeon, disabling his opponents with an almost insulting ease. His control was absolute. He could have obliterated them all in seconds with a single Rasengan, but he chose not to. He chose restraint. Shinobu, for her part, was a phantom of death. A flicker of a butterfly wing, a glint of steel, and another robed figure would fall, a tiny, almost invisible puncture mark on their neck. They cleared the central plaza in under a minute. The surviving cultists, seeing the impossible power of the 2 Hashira, retreated into the largest stone structure at the center of the settlement. Naruto stood amidst the dozen or so unconscious bodies, his breathing even. Shinobu stood over one of her own victims, her expression cold. This is inefficient, she stated, cleaning her blade. Leaving them alive creates prisoners, which creates logistical problems. A corpse is a problem solved. A corpse is a life ended, Naruto countered, his voice losing its easygoing tone for the first time. They're being misled, Kocho-san. They're not evil, just lost. Their intentions are irrelevant when their actions lead to the deaths of innocent people and my comrades, she retorted. Sympathy is a luxury we cannot afford. Before he could reply, a voice echoed from the central building. It was cold, devoid of emotion. The light bearers have come. The ones who sing too loudly. You disrupt the glorious silence. The heavy stone doors of the building groaned open. A man stood there, older than the others, his face visible. It was pale and gaunt, his eyes holding a terrifying, nihilistic calm. He held a large, ornate staff topped with a spiraling, black orb that seemed to drink the light around it. You cannot comprehend the salvation we offer, the leader said. A perfect, peaceful void. An end to the pointless struggle of life. The august star of heaven is coming to consume this flawed creation. He will devour the fleeting tyranny of the demon king and the false hope of the sun goddess. All will be quiet. All will be one with nothingness. Naruto's eyes narrowed. The hungry star. The leader's lips curled into a faint, chilling smile. So, you have heard the whispers. You are a special kind of noise, aren't you? A bright, loud sun. Amatsu Mikabashi will enjoy silencing you. He raised his staff, and the black orb at its tip began to glow with a dark, violet energy. The cold in the air intensified, and the very ND beneath Naruto and Shinobu's feet began to feel unstable, as if reality itself was thinning. Shinobu, the staff, Naruto yelled, his instinct screaming. He didn't wait for her. He burst forward, a golden blur. The leader slammed the butt of the staff into the ground. A wave of pure null energy erupted outwards. It wasn't an explosion of force, but of anti-force. It didn't push, it erased. The ground it passed over turned to the same dead, sterile gray as the patch on Fujikasane. Shinobu, with her incredible speed, leapt into the air to avoid the wave. Naruto, already in motion, met it head-on. He thrust his palm forward. A disk of golden ki spinning into existence. He didn't try to overpower the wave, but to deflect it, to carve a path through it. The two forces met. For a moment, there was a silent, violent struggle between the golden energy of life and the black energy of void. The air crackled. Naruto gritted his teeth, the muscles in his arms straining. He was redirecting a force that defied physics. A tide of pure entropy. He managed to part the wave, letting it flow harmlessly past him on either side, carving two dead gray scars in the earth. The effort cost him, but it gave Shinobu the opening she needed. From the apex of her jump, she dove like a hawk, her haori spreading like wings. She was faster than the leader could react. Her blade, a mere glint in the dim light, plunged deep into the man's shoulder, pinning his staff-wielding arm to his body. He cried out, a sound of pure agony, and dropped the staff. The black orb flickered and died. Naruto was on him in the next instant, a hand chopping down on the back of his neck. The leader crumpled, unconscious. Silence returned to the valley, broken only by the sound of Shinobu landing lightly on her feet. The mist began to recede. The oppressive cold lessened. With the artifact inert, the valley was already beginning to heal itself, life energy slowly seeping back into the blighted areas. Shinobu looked at the two deep, dead gray scars in the ground that bracketed the path Naruto had taken. She looked at his arm, which was smoking faintly, the sleeve of his uniform singed away. She looked at his face, which was grim but resolute. He had met a wave of literal nothingness and won. Your senses are becoming slightly more credible, Uzumaki-san, she said, her voice lacking its usual mocking edge. It was a statement of fact. They made a temporary camp as dusk fell, binding the unconscious cultists, including the leader. They needed to wait for a cleanup crew from the Kikuchi to transport the prisoners. They built a small fire. Its warmth and light a welcome defiance against the lingering chill of the valley. Shinobu was tending to her blade, meticulously cleaning and polishing it. Naruto sat on the other side of the fire, staring into the flames. He had been quiet since the fight, a thoughtful, heavy silence about him. Shinobu found the silence more unnerving than their usual banter. She preferred him to be a straightforward, simple-minded powerhouse. It made him easy to categorize. This quiet, contemplative version was harder to read. You were bothered, she stated, not a question. I've felt that cold before, he said, his eyes not leaving the fire. On Fujikasane, a demon dissolved into that same black rot. It talked about a hungry star. Amatsu Mikabashi, Shinobu supplied, her voice soft. The August star of heaven. In the old myths, it was a primordial deity of chaos, born before the heavens and the earth. A being of nothingness that existed before existence. I always assumed it was just a story. Stories come from somewhere, Naruto murmured. These people, they worship it. They want it to destroy everything. Why? What kind of despair drives someone to wish for total oblivion? Shinobu stopped her polishing. She looked at Naruto, at the genuine confusion and sadness in his eyes. He wasn't just analyzing a threat, he was trying to understand the pain that created it. It was a depth of empathy she had trained herself to suppress. Empathy was a weakness. It was what got her sister, Kanao, killed. Kanao, who had dreamed of a world where humans and demons could live in peace. A beautiful, naive, and ultimately fatal dream. Despair is a powerful corrosive, Uzumaki-san, she said, her voice turning cool and distant. It eats away at a person until there is nothing left but the desire for it all to end. Hope is the first casualty. Naruto finally looked up from the fire, his blue eyes meeting hers across the dancing flames. The firelight cast strange shadows on his face, making the whisker marks on his cheeks seem starker. He saw it then, not with his special senses, but with simple, human perception. The mask was back in place, the serene, smiling facade of the insect Hashira. But for a fleeting moment after the battle, it had slipped. He had seen the exhaustion, the fury, the profound, soul-deep rage simmering just beneath the surface. It was a fire far hotter than the one between them. He didn't offer pity. He didn't offer a platitude about things getting better. He offered something far more dangerous, acknowledgement. The rage you carry, he said, his voice quiet but clear, cutting through the crackle of the fire. It must be heavy. Shinobu froze. Her hands, holding her blade and a soft cloth, went perfectly still. Her smile became brittle, a fragile thing of painted glass. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, he said, his gaze unwavering. He wasn't accusing. He was just stating a fact. I can't feel it with my ki. This is different. I can just see it. When you fight, when you think no one is looking. It's in your eyes. It's a furnace. And you're standing right in front of it. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. You don't have to carry it alone. For the first time since she was a child, Shinobu Kocho was speechless. The words struck her with the force of a physical blow. Everyone saw her smile. Some, like the other Hashira, knew it was fake, a social necessity. They saw the cold strategist beneath. But no one had ever looked at her and seen the rage. They saw her sister's loss as a tragedy, a source of sadness. They never understood that her grief had long ago curdled into a white-hot, all-consuming fury at the demon who took her and the world that allowed it to happen. Naruto didn't just see it. He named it, and he didn't judge it. He called it heavy, which it was. It was a mountain she carried on her shoulders every single day. Her training, her instincts, her every defense screamed at her to deflect. To mock him, to poison him with words and push him away. You are being absurd, Uzumaki-san, she snapped, her voice sharp and brittle. My emotional state is none of your concern. You would do well to focus on the mission instead of engaging in amateur psychology. She stood up abruptly, turning her back to him in the fire, presenting him with the image of the butterfly on her haori. It was a dismissal, an order to stand down. Naruto didn't press. He just watched her, his expression softening with an understanding that she found utterly infuriating. He had planted a seed, and he knew it. He turned his attention back to the fire. Shinobu stood there in the darkness, her back ramrod straight, her knuckles white where she gripped her sword. His words echoed in her mind. It must be heavy. You don't have to carry it alone. Illogical, presumptuous, intrusive. And yet, no one had ever offered to share the weight. They only ever offered pity for the wound. He was the first to acknowledge the burden of the scar. She spent the rest of the night on watch, finding solace in the familiar quiet and the cold, hard logic of patrol patterns. But every time her gaze swept over the camp, it lingered for a moment too long on the sleeping form of the sage Hashira, the man who carried his own immense, world-breaking power as lightly as a summer cloak, yet saw the cruise weight of the burden she hid from the world. He was a walking contradiction, a being of immense power who chose restraint, a man of simple words who saw the most complex truths. He was deeply, profoundly unsettling. And as the first rays of dawn touched the blighted valley, Shinobu Kocho found herself with a new, illogical, and deeply disturbing hypothesis to consider. She wanted to understand Naruto Uzumaki. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Strength of Love, the Joy of Battle. The air in the main hall of the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters was as still and heavy as a held breath. The Hashira were assembled, kneeling on the tatami mats before Kagaya Ubuyashiki, who sat flanked by two of his daughters. The scent of incense was thick, but it couldn't mask the tension that radiated from the 9 most powerful warriors in the organization. Naruto and Shinobu had returned 2 days prior. Their report, delivered with Naruto's straightforward gravity and Shinobu's precise, chilling analysis, had sent a shockwave through the corps leadership. Demons were a known quantity, a monstrous but understandable evil. This, void cult, these children of the void, were something new. Human enemies who sought not conquest or power, but absolute annihilation, armed with a power that seemed to be the antithesis of life itself. This Amatsu Mikabashi, Kagaya said, his voice gentle but carrying an immense weight. This, August Star of Heaven, represents a philosophical threat as much as a physical one. It preys on despair. To fight it, we must be a beacon of unwavering hope. His sightless eyes seemed to sweep over the assembled Hashira. Naruto, Shinobu, you have done well. You have unveiled a shadow that has been growing in the dark for far too long. We will begin investigating these cold spots across the land. We must understand the scale of this infestation. Sanemi Shinazugawa, the wind Hashira, shifted, the scarred muscles of his shoulders bunching. And what of the prisoners? They're human. We can't just execute them. What do we do with them? We will question them, Shinobu answered coolly, her smile firmly in place. My estate has facilities for encouraging candor. I will learn everything they know. The implication was clear and utterly devoid of mercy, a chilling promise that made even the boisterous sound Hashira, Tengen Uzui, raise a jeweled eyebrow. Naruto, however, shook his head slightly. Torture won't work, not on them. All eyes turned to him. Their belief isn't based on loyalty or fear. It's built on a complete absence of hope. Inflicting more pain will only validate their nihilism. They'll welcome it. Then what do you suggest, sage boy? Sanemi sneered. We give them a warm meal and ask them nicely to betray their oblivion god. Naruto met his glare without flinching. I've been speaking with the leader. The one we captured. Not interrogating him. Just talking. He paused, gathering his thoughts. He said they are drawn to a noisy universe. Life, emotion, energy. That's the noise. Their goal is to quiet it. They aren't trying to build a new world. They're trying to unmake this one. We don't beat that by becoming as cold and ruthless as they are. We beat it by being what they hate. By being full of life. By protecting the noise. It was a strange, philosophical answer to a practical problem, and it hung in the air, challenging the black and white. Kill or be killed mentality of the Hashira. Before Sanemi could voice another sarcastic retort, Kagaya spoke. Naruto is right, he said softly, a faint smile gracing his scarred face. Our strength has never been just in our blades, but in our hearts. In our will to protect the warmth of human life. We will not stoop to their level of cold despair. He then looked towards Naruto. Your perspective is invaluable, my son. Continue your conversations. See if you can find a crack in their philosophy. Find something, anything, they still value. The meeting was dismissed. The Hashira rose, the tension slowly dissipating as they filed out into the sun-drenched gardens of the estate. Naruto felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Kyojuro Rengoku, the flame Hashira, his presence as warm and bright as his title. Well said, Uzumaki, he boomed, his wide, enthusiastic smile a force of nature. Fighting with spirit, the very essence of the flame. You set my heart ablaze. Naruto grinned, a genuine, easy smile. Thanks, Rengoku-san. Just calling it as I see it. As Rengoku walked off, another figure bounced toward him, her vibrant energy a stark contrast to the grim meeting they'd just left. It was Mitsuri Kanroji, the love Hashira, her pink and green hair swaying, a blush high on her cheeks. Naruto-san, she chirped, her voice full of an almost overwhelming cheerfulness. She clasped her hands together, her large, light green eyes sparkling. That was so amazing. The way you spoke, so full of confidence and life. It was wonderful, and I heard about your mission with Shinobu-chan. They said you fought a wave of pure nothing. You have to show me. Please. Before Naruto could even formulate a reply, she was barreling on. I've been wanting to ask you for ages. Everyone talks about your sun fox breathing, and your Rasengan, but it's all just whispers. I want to see it up close. Will you spar with me? Right now, we can go to the training grounds. It'll be fun. Her enthusiasm was infectious, a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated joy. While some of the other Hashira found her flightiness odd, Naruto found it refreshing. She was unapologetically herself, a fountain of positive emotion in a world drowning in sorrow. A spar? He asked, a slow grin spreading across his face. The stress of the mission, the chilling discovery of the cult, the tension of the meeting, it all seemed to melt away under the bright sun of her personality. A good, honest fight sounded like the perfect antidote. All right, Kanroji-san, you're on. Yay, she squealed, grabbing his hand and practically dragging him towards the main training dojo. Oh, this is going to be so exciting. I hope you're ready. Iguro-san says my technique is hard to read. The news of the impromptu spar spread like wildfire. A match between two of the most physically powerful hashira was a rare event. Soon, a small crowd had gathered. Off to the side, Shinobu watched with her usual placid smile, flanked by her Suguko, Kanao, who stood silently, her gaze fixed on Naruto. Obanai Iguro, the serpent hashira, was perched in a nearby tree, his mismatched eyes glaring daggers at Naruto, his protective snake, Kaburamaru, hissing softly. Even Tengen and Rengoku had lingered, curious to see the spectacle. Naruto and Mitsuri stood opposite each other in the center of the vast, dusty training ground. Mitsuri was already drawing her unique blade. It was a long, thin, whip-like sword, impossibly flexible. Only her unique muscle composition allowed her to wield it effectively. She held it with a cheerful smile. But her stance was perfectly balanced, ready for action. Ready when you are, Naruto-san. She beamed. Naruto drew his own blade, the silver steel gleaming in the sun. He didn't settle into a traditional kendo stance. He held the sword in a relaxed, one-handed grip, his body loose, his feet planted. It was a stance that screamed of openings, yet his presence was anything but vulnerable. It was the calm before a storm. Let's have a good match, Kanroji-san, he said, his voice dropping into a low, focused timbre. The spar began not with a charge, but with a blur of motion. Mitsuri was the first to move. Love breathing, first form, shivers of first love. She dashed forward, her whip blade trailing behind her before lashing out in a series of rapid, winding slashes that filled the air, leaving pinkish energy trails in their wake. It was a beautiful and utterly deadly attack, designed to overwhelm and dismember. Naruto didn't try to block. To block a whip with a sword was folly. Instead, he moved, he flowed, he entered the storm of her attack, his movements economical and precise. He didn't dodge so much as weave between the strikes, the lethal edge of her blade missing him by millimeters. It was an incredible display of spatial awareness and reflexes. From the sidelines, Obanai's glare intensified. He's just dodging. He can't keep that up. As if hearing him, Naruto made his first offensive move. Inside the whirlwind of her attack, he saw his opening. He spun on his heel, his own blade coming around in a low, sweeping arc. He wasn't aiming for her, but for her weapon. The flat of his blade met the flat of hers with a sharp clang. The impact, amplified by his ki, sent a shockwave up the whipped sword, forcing Mitsuri to leap back to maintain her grip. The exchange had lasted less than 3 seconds. Mitsuri giggled, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Wow, you're so fast. No one ever gets that close. She didn't give him a moment to breathe. Love breathing, fifth form. Swaying love, willed claw. She somersaulted through the air, her blade flipping and twisting around her like a gymnast's ribbon, creating a vortex of slashes. It was an attack from all angles at once. This time, Naruto didn't dodge. He stood his ground. He took a deep breath, and his entire blade flared with a brilliant golden light. The air around it crackled with raw power. He met her swirling vortex with a single, upward slash, Sun Fox style, rising sun flash. It wasn't a standard technique. It was a concept, a burst of pure, overwhelming force concentrated into one impossibly fast movement. His golden blade clashed with her swirling storm of steel. The result was not a single clang, but a deafening, continuous shriek of metal on metal as his single slash deflected dozens of hers in a fraction of a second. Sparks flew like a miniature fireworks display. The force of the impact threw Mitsuri high into the air, but she twisted gracefully, landing on her feet 50 feet away, her smile wider than ever. Incredible, she shouted, her voice filled with genuine awe. You matched my willed claw with one move. You really are as strong as they say. Naruto grinned back, spinning his blade in a flashy arc before settling back into his relaxed stance. You're not so bad yourself, Kanroji-san. Your strength is unreal. This wasn't trash talk or empty flattery. He meant it. He could feel the prodigious physical power coiled in her muscles, the sheer force behind every whip of her blade. It was immense, far beyond what her slender frame suggested. And he found it absolutely amazing. In the tree, Obanai nearly choked. In the crowd, Shinobu's smile seemed a little more genuine. Kanao's impassive face held a flicker of something. Wonder. My turn to get serious then, Mitsuri declared. She took a deep breath. And the air around her seemed to shimmer. Love breathing, sixth form, cat-legged winds of love. She launched herself forward again, her whip sword now coiling and uncoiling at dizzying speeds, creating a shield of swirling steel around her as she closed the distance. Naruto knew he couldn't break through that defense with his sword alone. He sheathed his blade in one smooth motion. As she bore down on him, he thrust his right hand forward, palm open. A perfect sphere of shrieking, swirling golden ki roared into existence. The Rasengan. What is that? Tengen exclaimed, his eyes wide, flamboyantly loud. Mitsuri's eyes widened in delight and surprise. She couldn't stop her momentum. She was about to crash into that terrifying ball of energy. But Naruto didn't thrust it forward. At the last second, he angled his hand upwards. The Rasengan shot into the sky, carving a spiraling tunnel in the clouds above before dissipating with a final thunderclap. He had used it as a feint. In the split second she was distracted by the attack, he dropped low, sweeping her legs out from under her. It was a simple, effective move, but against a Hashira of her caliber, it should have been impossible. Yet his speed, bolstered by his ki, was just a fraction faster than her reaction time. She tumbled, but with her incredible flexibility, she twisted in midair, attempting to land on her hands. Before she could, Naruto was there. He didn't strike her. He didn't restrain her. He simply appeared behind her, one arm hooking under her arms, the other under her knees, catching her and lifting her up in a bridal-style carry before she could even hit the ground. The training ground went completely silent. Mitsuri hung there in his arms, blinking in surprise. The spar was over. He had captured her. Her whip sword lay forgotten on the ground. She looked up at his face, inches from hers. He was grinning, his blue eyes sparkling with mischief. I win, he said simply. For a moment, Mitsuri's brain failed to compute. Then, a furious blush erupted across her face, starting from her neck and flooding up to the tips of her ears. She wasn't embarrassed by the loss. She was overwhelmed by the moment. No one had ever treated her like this. Men were either terrified of her strength, or they admonished her for it, telling her she'd never find a husband if she could lift a rock bigger than a cow. They saw her as a freak of nature. Naruto had just faced that strength head-on, celebrated it, matched it, and then ended their spar not with a blow, but with this. It was playful, it was respectful, it was romantic. Her heart, which was already beating fast from the exertion, began to pound against her ribs for an entirely different reason. You can put me down now, Naruto-san. She stammered, unable to meet his eyes. Naruto gently set her on her feet. That was a great fight, he said, his smile softening. Your strength is beautiful, Kanroji-san. Truly. The compliment, so simple and sincere, struck her to her core. He wasn't just talking about her fighting style. He was talking about her. Her strength, the very thing that had made her an outcast. He called it beautiful. A loud crack broke the silence. Everyone turned. A section of the dojo's ancient stone foundation, which had been near Naruto's final Rasengan feint, had fractured under the stress. A large chunk of it crumbled away, revealing a dark, hollow space beneath. The light-hearted atmosphere vanished instantly. Naruto's head whipped around, his senses on high alert. Inside that newly revealed cavity, he felt it. The cold. It was the same familiar, dead-wrong signature of the Void Cult. A small, but potent, pocket of nothingness right here, in the heart of the Demon Slayer headquarters. He was at the hole in an instant, kneeling down. Shinobu was right behind him, her playful demeanor gone, replaced by the sharp focus of the insect Hashira. What is it? She asked, her voice low. Naruto reached into the dark space. His fingers brushed against cold, smooth iron. He pulled out a small, black box, no bigger than his fist. It was covered in the same eye strainy. ing spiral sigils as the cultists' settlement. The cold was emanating from it, a faint but undeniable pulse of null energy. An artifact, Naruto said grimly. A void cult artifact, hidden here, under the foundation. The implication was immediate and horrifying. A spy, a traitor, someone within the Demon Slayer Corps, someone with access to the headquarters itself, was a sympathizer, or a member, of the Children of the Void. The external threat they had just discovered had a foothold within their own walls. The joyous spar, the celebration of strength and life, had uncovered a deep, insidious sickness. Obanai dropped from his tree, his face grim, his hand on his sword. Rengoku and Tengen approached, their expressions losing all trace of mirth. The friendly competition was over. This was a declaration of internal war. We have to take this to Oyakata-sama, Shinobu said, her voice tight. Immediately. Later that evening, the moon hung high and full in the sky, bathing the gardens in a silvery light. The artifact was secure, and Kaguya had been informed. The investigation had begun, casting a pall of suspicion and paranoia over the entire headquarters. Naruto sat on the Ingawa of his personal estate, a small but comfortable house granted to him as a Hashira. He was staring up at the moon, his mind racing. The joy of the spar felt like a distant memory, tainted by the chilling discovery that followed. He heard soft footsteps on the wooden porch. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. He could feel her approaching, her energy a whirlwind of nervous excitement and flustered determination. Naruto-san. Mitsuri's voice was soft, hesitant. He turned and gave her a small smile. Kanroji-san. Is everything all right? She stood there, wringing her hands, her face flushed in the moonlight. I wanted to thank you. For the spar, and for what you said. I just said what was true, he replied gently. No one's ever said that before, she said, her voice barely a whisper. They always look at me like I'm too much, too strong, too loud, I eat too much, I'm just wrong. Tears welled in her eyes, but she fought them back. But you looked at me, and you smiled. You enjoyed it. You didn't just tolerate my strength, you celebrated it. She took a deep, shuddering breath, as if steeling herself for a terrifying battle. When you caught me, my heart, it went, ba-dump thump thump, so fast, I thought it was going to burst. I've never felt that way before. And I realized, I know, I have very strong feelings for you, Naruto-san. She bowed deeply, her face hidden from view. I'm in love with you. The confession hung in the quiet night air, pure and honest and utterly vulnerable. Naruto was silent for a long moment. He looked at this incredible woman, a warrior of immense power and a person of even greater heart, who had spent her life being made to feel ashamed of the very things that made her magnificent. He saw her bravery, not just on the battlefield, but in this moment, laying her heart bare. He stood up and walked over to her. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. She flinched, then relaxed at his touch. Mitsuri, he said, using her given name for the first time. Her head shot up, her eyes wide with surprise. He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes and made them shine. I feel it too. Her jaw dropped slightly. You do. Your strength isn't just in your sword, he said, his voice soft and sincere. It's in your heart. It's so bright and warm, it's like the sun. How could anyone not be drawn to that? He reached out and gently tucked a stray strand of her pink hair behind her ear. You're not too much. You're exactly right. Tears, no longer held back, streamed down her face. But they were tears of joy, of relief, of a lifetime of insecurity being washed away by a few simple, honest words. She let out a sob that was half a laugh and threw her arms around him, hugging him with the unrestrained, bone-crushing strength that was uniquely hers. Naruto just laughed and hugged her back, holding her tight. He could feel the frantic, happy thumping of her heart against his chest. In a world threatened by demons from below and a void from above, in a home now plagued by suspicion and betrayal, this moment of pure, honest connection was an act of defiance. It was a pocket of warmth and light. It was hope. And as he held her, he knew, with the same certainty he felt when sensing a demon, that this was a light he would protect with everything he had. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Vows of the Sun and Moon. The swordsmith village was a secret nestled in the heart of the mountains, its location a closely guarded trust known only to a select few. It was the forge of the Demon Slayer Corps, the place where the sun-soaked ore was hammered and folded into the blades that were humanity's last line of defense. The air here didn't taste of wisteria or fear, but of coal smoke, hot metal, and the sharp, clean scent of mountain pines. Naruto had come for a new sword. His first blade, forged from the sun-drenched ore he'd chosen after the final selection, had served him well. But it was, at its heart, a normal Nichiren blade. It changed color and was remarkably durable, but it struggled to contain the sheer, explosive output of his more powerful ki-based techniques. The Rasengan, in particular, was anathema to it. Channeling that much raw, spiraling energy through the metal was like trying to drink a river through a straw. He needed something more. A blade forged not just to kill demons, but to act as a conduit for his unique power. He wasn't alone. Mitsuri had accompanied him, ostensibly for a check-up, on her own whip sword, but in reality, she simply hadn't wanted to leave his side since their confession. Their new relationship was a thing of simple, uncomplicated joy. They sparred, they ate prodigious meals that terrified the staff at the Butterfly Mansion, and they talked. For the first time, Mitsuri spoke of her past without shame, and for the first time, Naruto spoke of the ghost memories of his previous life, the strange echoes of loneliness and a longing for acceptance that had defined him. They found in each other an easy, unconditional acceptance. Naruto was currently in a tense standoff with his swordsmith, a diminutive man named Hotaru Higanezuka, who was, as usual, wearing a large, comical Hayatoko mask. Absolutely not, Higanezuka shrieked, waving a set of tongs menacingly. You want me to do what? Incorporate a special seal matrix. Create a channel for your life energy. This is a sword, you blonde-haired heathen, not a magic wand. I forge steel, I hammer, I fold, I don't draw pretty pictures on it. Naruto sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Higanezuka-san, please. My ki has a specific flow. If we can carve the seals into the tang, before the blade is quenched, the metal's structure might adapt. It could become a part of the sword. Not just a weapon I hold. He held out his hand, and a small, perfectly stable Rasengan, no bigger than a marble, spun in his palm. This energy is precise. I can guide it. I just need the sword to be able to handle it. Higanezuka stared at the miniature typhoon in Naruto's hand, his masked head tilting. The anger in his posture was slowly being replaced by a craftsman's obsessive curiosity. A spiraling energy, constant rotation, the heat would be immense, the internal stress. You've broken 3 blades this year, haven't you? Haven't you? His rage returned full force. You ingrate, do you know how much sweat and tears goes into each blade? He lunged forward with his tongs. Naruto sidestepped him easily. This is why I need a new one, Naruto said, dodging another frantic attack. One that won't break. Mitsuri, who had been watching from the doorway with a plate of sakura mochi, giggled into her hand. They're getting along so well. Their light-hearted argument was cut short by a sudden, piercing shriek from the Kasugai crow perched on a nearby roof. It was followed by another, and another, a chorus of panicked, desperate caws echoing through the valley. Naruto stopped moving. The playful smile vanished from his face, replaced by an expression of cold, absolute focus. Higanezuka froze, tongs held aloft. The ground shuddered. Not an earthquake. It was a deep, resonant thump, like a giant fist striking the earth. Then another. The air, once clear and smelling of pine, was suddenly thick with a palpable malevolence. Demons, Naruto breathed, his senses flaring. And not just any demons. The energy signatures were monstrous, twisted, and ancient. They felt like jagged shards of glass in the natural harmony of the world. 2 of them, both immensely powerful, upper moons. He looked at Mitsuri. Her own expression had transformed. The joyful girl was gone, replaced by the love Hashira. Her eyes were sharp, her hand already on the hilt of her sheathed blade. Get the villagers to safety, Naruto commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. The smiths are the priority. Gather them, protect them. I'll meet the first one. Be careful, she said, her voice tight with worry. Always, he replied, giving her a quick, reassuring nod before he became a golden blur, streaking towards the source of the disturbance at the village's edge. He arrived at a scene of surreal horror. Standing in a clearing, surrounded by a ring of ornate, porcelain pots, was a demon with a grotesque, distorted body. Its mouth was where its eyes should be, and its eyes were on its hands. It was Gyoko. Upper Moon 5. Hio, Hio. The demon cackled, its voice gurgling as if through water. What a magnificent find. A village of artisans. Their death throes will be the perfect inspiration for my next masterpiece. Perhaps I'll put their heads on a lovely vase. Before he could finish his monologue, something slammed into him. It wasn't a sword. It was Naruto's foot, wreathed in golden ki, connecting with his chest in a devastating axe kick. The impact sent Gyoko flying backward, crashing through several of his own pots before plowing a trench in the earth. Your art is trash, Naruto stated, landing lightly, and you're not touching a single person in this village. Gyoko pulled himself from the dirt, his body already regenerating, a look of pure rage on his hand faces. You dare to strike my beautiful form. You uncultured swine, I'll turn you into fish food. He slapped his hands together, and from one of his pots, a swarm of grotesque fish-like demons with venomous fins erupted, swarming towards Naruto. Naruto didn't even draw his blade. He clapped his hands together. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. With a series of pops, a dozen ical copies of Naruto appeared around him. The clones, each glowing faintly with ki, met the fish demon swarm head-on, tearing them apart with bare hands and precise bursts of energy. Gyoko stared, his mouth agape. See clones. What devilry is this? This is me just getting warmed up, the real Naruto said, taking a step forward. But as he prepared to press the attack, a second, more insidio's wave of energy washed over the village from the opposite direction. It was a suffocating aura of pure terror, accompanied by the sound of scuttling, frantic movement. The other one, Naruto thought, his senses stretched to their limit. He could feel Mitsuri engaging the main body of villagers, herding them towards the chief's fortified house. He could feel the smiths, frozen in terror. And he could feel this new threat, no, 4 new threats, splitting off from a single source. Hantengu. Upper Moon 4. My clones can handle him for a minute, Naruto said to himself, making a split-second decision. Gyoko was a direct threat. But Hantengu's clones, with their varied and powerful abilities, could cause chaos on a massive scale, overwhelming Mitsuri and slaughtering the villagers. He had to prioritize. Protect the people first. He disengaged from Gyoko, leaving his clones to run interference, and rocketed towards the center of the village. He arrived to find chaos. A small, winged demon was unleashing sonic shrieks that shattered windows and buckled buildings. A larger, spear-wielding demon was gleefully impaling fleeing smiths. A third, holding a fan, was generating cyclonic gusts of wind, tearing roofs from houses. Mitsuri was a pink whirlwind, her whip sword a constant blur, trying to fight all of them at once. Kanroji-san, Naruto yelled. Take the spear user. I've got the other two. Relief flooded her face. Naruto-kun. Their battlefield coordination was instantaneous and flawless. Mitsuri, her full power unleashed, met the spear demon, Karaku, head-on. Love breathing, second form, love pangs. Her blade lashed out in a long, winding slash, forcing the demon to defend rather than attack. Naruto, meanwhile, dealt with the other two. He formed a Rasengan in his GHT hand and launched himself at the fan-wielding demon, Sekido. The demon brought his fan up to create another gale, but Naruto was too fast. He slammed the Rasengan into the demon's chest, and the assaulting explosion of spiraling energy didn't just wound him, it completely atomized his entire torso, leaving only a pair of legs that quickly dissolved. Simultaneously, he threw a kunai with a paper tag attached towards the shrieking demon, Yurogi. The tag flared with light. Hiraishin no Jutsu. In a flash of golden light, he vanished from his spot and reappeared in midair right above Yurogi. He didn't use a major technique. He simply brought his heel down on the demon's head with ki-enhanced force. The resulting crash drove the demon into the ground like a nail, creating a small crater. 2 of Hantengu's main emotional clones. Defeated in under 10 seconds. But just as he landed, a new presence appeared. A demon with a staff, exuding an aura of pure anger. And behind him, the one with the fan was already regenerating. "You'll pay for that," the anger demon, Izutsu, snarled, thrusting his Yari forward. Suddenly, two figures dropped from the sky, landing between Naruto and the demons. One was a vision in purple, her butterfly haori fluttering. The other was smaller, quieter, but moved with the same lethal grace, a butterfly ornament in her hair. Shinobu and Kanao, the first wave of reinforcements. Era, Shinobu said, her smile as sharp as the tip of her blade. "It seems you've started the party without us, Naruto-san. How rude." Kanao said nothing, but drew her blade, her eyes, clear and focused. Scanning the threats, there was no coin, no hesitation, just a warrior, ready. Naruto felt a surge of relief so profound it almost buckled his knees. Shinobu, Kanao, perfect timing. His mind was already working, recalculating, re-strategizing. Shinobu, Hantengu's clones are susceptible to poison, but they regenerate fast. We need to find the main body. He's tiny, hiding somewhere. Kanao, your eyes are the best here. Track him. I'll keep the big ones busy. He didn't wait for confirmation. He trusted them implicitly. He turned his attention back to the regenerating clones. Shinobu's smile widened. He hadn't given her a suggestion. He'd given her a strategic objective, trusting her expertise to achieve it. Understood, she said, before blurring into motion, her blade aimed at Izutsu. Insect breathing, dance of the centipede, 100-legged zigzag. Her blade struck a dozen times in a single instant, injecting a cocktail of her most potent wisteria poisons. Kanao, meanwhile, closed her eyes for a split second, taking a deep, calming breath. When she opened them, her focus was absolute. She ignored the large, loud threats of the clones and instead scanned the battlefield. Her senses and training honed to perceive the smallest detail, the slightest inconsistency. She was looking for the source. For the fear. The battle for the swordsmith village became a maelstrom of coordinated chaos. Naruto was the anchor, a whirlwind of golden energy and raw power, engaging Hantengu's most powerful forms head-on, his clones still harassing Gyoko at the edge of the village. Mitsuri, freed from having to defend on multiple fronts, became a devastating offensive force, her whip blade dancing and weaving, its every strike a killing blow against Gyoko's endless pot demons. Shinobu was a phantom, darting between clones, her poisons sowing weakness and decay. And Kanao, silent and focused, moved through the battlefield like a ghost, her eyes tracking the faint trail of the true Hantengu. It was Kanao who found him, a tiny, cowering demon hiding in the heart of a larger, wooden dragon construct created by a fifth clone. "Naruto-san," she called out, her voice clear and strong. In the wooden dragon's chest. That was all Naruto needed. He disengaged from his fight, letting Mitsuri and Shinobu take over. He shot into the air, hands flashing through seals. Futon. Rasenshuriken. A massive, four-pointed shuriken of shrieking wind and ki formed in his hand, its sound deafening. He hurled it. The attack tore through the air and slammed into the wooden dragon. A construct that had been giving Mitsuri trouble. It didn't just cut it. It disintegrated it on a cellular level, the storm of microscopic wind blades shredding it to dust. The blast exposed the tiny, terrified form of Hantengu. Before the demon could flee, Mitsuri's whip sword wrapped around its neck, and with a single, powerful pull, she severed its head. The remaining clones screamed and dissolved into ash. One upper moon down, Naruto landed, the Rasenshuriken having drained a good portion of his stamina. But there was no time to rest. At the edge of the village, his last clone poofed out of existence, and Gyoko, enraged and shimmering with power, turned his full attention on them. "You've cost me everything," Gyoko howled. "My beautiful pots, my time. Now I will show you my true form. My ultimate art." His body contorted, shedding its pot-like form and becoming a sleek, scaled creature. His speed and power magnified tenfold. He appeared in front of the closest person, a young swordsmith who had been hiding behind an anvil. "I'll start with this little morsel," he hissed. He never reached him. Kanao was there first. Flower-breathing, fourth form, Crimson Hanagoromo. Her blade moved in a single, graceful, curving slash that deflected Gyoko's claws. She stood between the demon and the boy, her sword held ready. She had acted without orders, without a coin, her body. moving purely on the instinct to protect. Naruto looked at her, a fierce pride swelling in his chest. He saw her choice, her will, made manifest in that single, protective stance. He looked at Shinobu, who was already preparing a new, more potent poison, her mind calculating the new form's weaknesses. He saw her sharp intellect, her unwavering resolve, a brilliant mind dedicated to eradicating the darkness. He looked at Mitsuri, her face flushed with the heat of battle, her eyes blazing with life and a fierce, protective love for the village and for him. He saw her strength, a power not just of body, but of heart. In the midst of this desperate battle, surrounded by the three women who had, in their own unique ways, captured his heart, a profound clarity washed over him. He was fighting for more than just a village. For more than just the core. He was fighting for them. For the future they could build together. A future filled with Mitsuri's joy, Shinobu's sharp wit, and Kanao's quiet strength. The thought solidified into a decision, as solid and real as the ground beneath his feet. Shinobu, Kanao, Mitsuri. He called out, his voice ringing with a new authority. Together, they didn't need to be told twice. They converged on Gyoko, a four-person storm of overwhelming power. Shinobu's feints created openings. Kanao's precise slashes exploited them. Mitsuri's wide, powerful attacks kept him off balance. And Naruto, at the center of it all, was the hammer. He waited for his moment, the one created by their perfect synergy. As Gyoko was forced to parry a strike from Mitsuri, his neck was exposed for a fraction of a second. Naruto was already there, his blade, glowing with a sun-like radiance, sliced through the air. The cut was perfect. Gyoko's head flew from his shoulders, an expression of shocked disbelief on its face. The second upper moon crumbled to dust. Silence fell over the ravaged village, broken only by the panting breaths of the four Hashira and the distant sound of weeping villagers. They had won. They had faced two upper moons, a force that could have annihilated them individually, and they had emerged victorious. Later, in the quiet devastation of the aftermath, as Kikuchi teams began tending to the wounded and assessing the damage, the four of them stood together near the village's hot springs, the steam mingling with the cool night air. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and a deep, soul-weary ache. Shinobu was the first to break the silence. She was looking at Naruto, her usual mask of polite amusement completely gone. Her violet eyes were unguarded, showing a mixture of respect and a strange, new vulnerability. Your strategies are unconventional, Naruto-san, she said, her voice soft. But they are undeniably effective. Your trust in us tonight, it was not misplaced. She took a small step closer. My feelings regarding you have become illogical. And yet, undeniable. I find your presence to be a disruptive, but not entirely unwelcome variable in my life. It was the closest thing to a confession her guarded heart could manage, and it was more honest than 1,000 flowery speeches. Kanao, who had been standing silently by Shinobu's side, then looked directly at Naruto. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet but firm, laced with a newfound confidence. My master is right, she then took a breath, speaking for herself. Before I met you, my world was a coin flip. You didn't force me to see things differently. You just showed me that I could choose. Tonight, I chose to protect that boy. I chose to fight with you all. Her gaze was clear and direct. I feel safe when I choose to stand with you. Mitsuri, who had been clinging to his arm, squeezed it tightly, her eyes shining with tears of relief and love. She didn't need to say anything. Her feelings were a brilliant, open book. Naruto looked at them, these three incredible, powerful, and beautifully complex women. He saw the path forward, not just through the war, but through life. It wasn't a life of ease he could offer. It was a life of struggle, of fighting against demons and the encroaching void. But it would be a life shared. A home built not of wood and paper, but of mutual trust, respect, and love. He took a deep breath, his heart full. Shinobu, Kanao, Mitsuri, he began, his voice thick with emotion. I love all of you. Shinobu, your mind, your strength to carry such a heavy burden, it's awe-inspiring. Kanao, your quiet will is like the strongest steel, and watching you find your own voice is one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Mitsuri, your heart is as bright as the sun, and you make the whole world warmer just by being in it. He looked at each of them in turn, his blue eyes earnest and sincere. I know this is insane. I know the world is falling apart. But maybe that's why we need this. A family. A bastion of light to hold against all the darkness. I don't want to choose between you. I want to build a life with all of you. He knelt, not as a warrior to his master, but as a man bearing his soul. Will you marry me, all of you? The proposal was audacious, unprecedented, and utterly, completely Naruto. Silence. Then, Mitsuri let out a choked sob of pure happiness. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. Shinobu laughed. A real, genuine laugh, free of sarcasm or poison. It was a beautiful sound. You are the most illogical man I have ever met, Naruto Uzumaki. She smiled, a true, warm smile that transformed her face. Yes, I will. All eyes turned to Kanao. She looked at Naruto, then at Shinobu, then at Mitsuri. A slow, hesitant, but radiant smile spread across her face. It was like watching a cherry blossom bloom in winter. Without a word, she knelt down in front of him and gently took his hand. Her answer clear in her touch and in her shining eyes. A few days later, in a quiet corner of the recovering headquarters, a simple, private ceremony was held. Kagaya Ubuyashiki, his gentle voice filled with a profound sense of hope, officiated. There were no crowds, no fancy decorations. It was just them, Naruto, Mitsuri, Shinobu, Kanao, 4 individuals, 4 powerful warriors, forging themselves into one family. It was a vow made not in peacetime, but on the front lines of a desperate war. A promise not of a happy ending, but of a happiness worth fighting for. As they stood together under the setting sun, a united front against the encroaching night, they were no longer just Hashira. They were a family, the ultimate anchor in a world descending into chaos. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Family and the Human Threat. The house was filled with the scent of ginger and soy sauce. In the sun-drenched kitchen, Mitsuri was humming a cheerful, off-key tune as she artfully arranged a mountain of food onto several large platters. There was grilled fish, simmered vegetables, and a truly heroic portion of rice. Her movements were full of a boundless, happy energy that seemed to make the very air in the room brighter. For Mitsuri, marriage was bliss, a constant state of ba-dump-thump, that she channeled into 2 primary activities, enthusiastic affection and cooking for an army. In the adjoining room, which served as a combination study and apothecary, Shinobu was grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle. Her work was as precise and focused as ever, but the ever-present, brittle smile had been replaced by a quiet, focused serenity. Her presence was a sharp, intelligent counterpoint to Mitsuri's overflowing warmth. She managed their household affairs, finances, mission schedules, supply requisitions, with the same lethal efficiency she applied to formulating poisons, bringing a surprising and welcome order to the delightful chaos Naruto and Mitsuri tended to create. On the Ingawa overlooking the small, meticulously kept garden, Kanao was practicing her forms. Her movements were as fluid and graceful as ever, but they held a new weight, a new confidence. She was no longer Jew Saint mimicking the forms her sister had taught her. She was inhabiting them, adapting them, making them her own. Occasionally, she would pause, a slight furrow in her brow, and call out, "Naruto-san, was that last transition too slow?" Naruto sat a few feet away, sipping tea. He wasn't meditating or training, just being. Watching his family, he'd offer a small piece of advice. Try shifting your weight just before you extend the blade. Use your momentum. And Kanao would nod, her expression one of focused concentration, and try again, the movement instantly smoother. This was their life now, in the precious, fleeting moments between missions. It was a mosaic of their personalities. Mitsuri's joy was the bright, vibrant color. Shinobu's intellect was the sharp, clean lines that gave it structure. Kanao's quiet growth was the subtle, deepening shade. And Naruto was the frame that held it all together, his steady, unwavering presence the foundation upon which they had built this strange, beautiful, and powerful family. Their marriage had sent ripples through the Demon Slayer core. It was unprecedented, a scandal to some of the more conservative elements. But to the other Hashira, it simply made a strange sort of sense. Tengen had declared it the most flamboyant household in Japan. Rengoku had heartily approved of a family built on such powerful spirit. Even Obanai, after a tense and deeply intimidating conversation with Naruto, A conversation that ended with a grudging, mutual respect. Had accepted it, his only condition being that Naruto must guarantee Kanroji's happiness or face my blade. Naruto had simply replied, her happiness is my own. On that, we are in agreement. But the peace of their domestic life was a fragile bubble in a world growing darker. The Void Cult, though driven from the Jukai Valley, was not gone. Reports from Kasugai Crows spoke of other villages falling silent, of strange, cold patches appearing in the wilderness. The spy within the core had yet to be found. A fact that kept a constant, low-level paranoia humming just beneath the surface of daily life. And now, a new threat was emerging. Not from the shadows or from the primordial darkness, but from the sunlit halls of power in Tokyo. The incident that brought this new enemy to their doorstep began with a scream. It was a high-pitched, terrified sound, coming from the market district. Just outside the corp's unofficial territory. Naruto was on his feet in an instant, his tea forgotten. Kanao sheathed her sword and was moving before he even gave a command. They arrived to a scene of chaos and confusion. There were no demons. Instead, a cordon of men in unfamiliar, dark green uniforms had surrounded a section of the market. They were armed not with swords, but with strange, foreign-looking rifles. Their movements were disciplined, professional, and utterly cold. In the center of their cordon, several other soldiers were attempting to force a struggling figure into a heavy, iron-strapped wagon. The figure was a demon slayer. A young boy, no older than 15, his face pale with terror, his slayer uniform torn. His Nichiren blade lay shattered on the ground. Let me go, the boy cried, struggling against the iron-cuffed hands that held him. I've done nothing wrong. Cease resisting. Supernatural, one of the soldiers said, his voice flat and emotionless. He gestured with his rifle. You are a threat to public order and national security. You will be contained for study. Naruto and Kanao landed on a nearby rooftop, taking in the scene. The soldiers, energy felt, blank. Not cold and empty like the cultists, but disciplined, suppressed. They were soldiers, trained to be cogs in a machine. What is this? Kanao whispered, her hand on her blade. Trouble, Naruto said grimly. The government. The lead soldier, a man with a neat mustache and cold, calculating eyes, raised his rifle towards the gathered crowd of frightened civilians. Disperse immediately. This is an official action of the Imperial Japanese Army's Special Ordnance Division. Failure to comply will be met with force. The name meant nothing to Naruto, but their intent was brutally clear. They were taking one of their own. Naruto didn't hesitate. He dropped from the rooftop, landing in the center of the cordon with a soft thud that nonetheless drew every eye. He didn't draw his weapon. He simply stood there, his hands loose at his sides, his blue eyes sweeping over the soldiers. His presence was so sudden, so full of quiet authority, that for a moment, no one moved. Release the boy, Naruto said. It wasn't a request. It was a simple statement of what was about to happen. The leader, a man who introduced himself as Colonel Takeda, laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. And who are you? Another one of these costumed freaks. I am acting on the authority of the Meiji Emperor. We have been monitoring your little secret society for months. Your slayers, and the demons, you fight are two sides of the same unnatural coin. Monstrously strong, unnaturally fast, you are all abominations. A threat to the modernization of Japan. We protect the people of Japan from things you refuse to see, Naruto countered. His voice dangerously calm. That boy is a member of the Demon Slayer Corps. He is under my protection. You will let him go. This is your only warning. Takeda's eyes narrowed. He saw the whisker marks on Naruto's cheeks, the sheer confidence in his stance. This was no mere swordsman. This was something else. He had been briefed about a Sage Hashira, a being of impossible power. Contain him, Takeda ordered, a flicker of scientific curiosity overriding his caution. Use of lethal force is not authorized, but disable him at all costs. I want him alive. The soldiers raised their rifles. These were not standard army weapons. Naruto could see the strange, bulky mechanisms near the barrels. They fired, not bullets, but a series of heavy, weighted nets shot from pneumatic launchers. Simultaneously, other soldiers threw small glass orbs that shattered on the ground, releasing a thick, acrid gas designed to disorient and incapacitate. It was a well-executed, non-lethal ambush. It would have worked on almost any other Hashira. It did not work on Naruto. The moment they fired, he moved. He was a blur, too fast for the human eye to track. He appeared behind the two soldiers holding the young slayer, and delivered two precise chops to the backs of their necks. They crumpled, unconscious. He pushed the terrified boy behind him. Get back, now. He turned to face the incoming nets. He didn't dodge them. He thrust his palms forward, releasing a controlled, invisible pulse of ki. Hake Kusho. The air buckled. The nets were blown back into the faces of the soldiers who fired them, tangling them up in their own traps. The gas washed over him. He simply held his breath, his prodigious chakra reserves, the ghost of his former life, making the need for air a trivial concern. In the space of 5 seconds, their entire strategy had fallen apart. Kanao, from her rooftop perch, watched with wide eyes. She saw Takeda's hand drop to the pistol at his hip. Before he could even draw it, a single, silent Senbon needle, almost invisible, flew from her hand and embedded itself in the back of his wrist. He cried out in pain and surprise, his hand going numb and useless. He stared at his hand, then up at the rooftop, seeing her for the first time. Down below, Naruto moved through the remaining soldiers. It was not a fight. It was a lesson in control. He moved with the fluid grace of a dancer and the terrifying precision of a surgeon. A palm strike here, a nerve pinch there. He dislocated shoulders, disabled wrists, and swept legs. He was a whirlwind of controlled, non-lethal force. Within 30 seconds, the entire elite unit of 20 soldiers lay groaning, disarmed, and utterly defeated on the ground. Not a single one of them was dead. Not a single one was permanently injured. But every single one of them was broken. Naruto stood in the center of the defeated unit, the gas swirling harmlessly around his ankles. He hadn't even drawn his sword. He hadn't broken a sweat. Colonel Takeda stared, his face pale, his professional composure shattered. A massacre, he could have understood. That was simple violence. But this was something else entirely. This was a demonstration of power so absolute, so controlled, that it was more terrifying than any rampage. This one man had dismantled an elite military unit without killing anyone, as if he were scolding a group of unruly children. Naruto walked over to him, his footsteps the only sound in the stunned silence. He looked down at Takeda, his blue eyes not filled with anger, but with a profound, weary disappointment. "You call us monsters," Naruto said, his voice low and resonant. "But you're the ones who point guns at your own countrymen. You hunt what you don't understand, and you'll doom us all because of your ignorance." He knelt down, getting face to face with the trembling colonel. "There's a real monster coming, Takeda. Not the demons we fight. Something older, colder. A thing called Amatsu Mikabashi that wants to eat the sky. It leads a cult of humans who are helping it, who have infiltrated every level of society, maybe even your own government. While you're busy hunting us, the real threat is gathering in the shadows. And when it comes, your guns and your pride won't be worth a damn." He stood up, turning his back on the man. "This is a détente. Go back to your emperor. Tell him the Demon Slayer Corps is not his enemy. Tell him to open his eyes and look at the real darkness. Or the next time we meet, I won't be this gentle." He gestured to Kanao, and together they melted into the alleys, taking the rescued Slayer with them, leaving Takeda and his defeated Oni busters in the silent, gaping square. The interrogation of the Void Cult leader, a man named Kageyama, had been exactly as Naruto predicted, a complete failure. Shinobu's most persuasive chemical cocktails, the ones that could make a stone statue sing, had no effect. Physical intimidation was met with a serene, welcoming smile. He had nothing to fear from pain or death. He was a true believer. So, Naruto had changed tactics. For a week, he had simply sat with Kageyama in his cell in the Butterfly Mansion's secure ward. He brought him food, he brought him tea, and he talked, not about the cult, not about their plans. He talked about the taste of good ramen, about the joy of watching the sun rise, about the feeling of a hard day's work. He talked about noise. Today, he sat across from the gaunt, hollow-eyed man, a game of Go set up between them. "You speak of life as if it is a prize," Kageyama said. His voice a dry rasp. He placed a black stone on the board with a soft click. But it is a sickness. A random, chaotic spasm in a universe that longs for the perfect equilibrium of silence. Birth, struggle, pain, death. It is a pointless, cruel cycle. We do not seek to destroy. We seek to heal, to return everything to the perfect, peaceful state of non-existence. Peace, Naruto countered, placing a white stone. There's no peace in nothing. There's just nothing. Peace is what you feel after a good meal when you're full and warm. It's the quiet of a house when your family is safe and asleep. It's a feeling, Kageyama. It requires life to experience it. Kageyama almost smiled. You are a fascinating anomaly, Sage Hashira. You burn so brightly. The great star will take special notice of you. You are the loudest noise of all. He looked at Naruto, his eyes holding a terrifying sincerity. The star is not a god we summon. It is a cosmic predator. Our universe, with its light, its life, its constant screaming energy, it is a beacon. A noisy house in a silent wilderness, drawing the attention of the thing that hunts. We are not its servants. We are its heralds. We are trying to quiet the house before the hunter breaks down the door. We offer the mercy of a quick, clean end, rather than the terror of being devoured. A chill went down Naruto's spine. It was the most terrifying motivation he had ever encountered. Not greed, not power, not revenge. It was a philosophy of cosmic terror, a deeply held belief that oblivion was a kindness. You're wrong, Naruto said softly. The hunter may be coming. But you don't quiet the house. You reinforce the walls. You light every lamp. You stand together and you tell the darkness that this is your home, and you will not let it be taken. He placed another white stone, surrounding a large group of Kageyama's black stones. Checkmate, I believe. Kageyama looked down at the board, at his own captured, surrounded pieces. For the first time, a flicker of something, doubt, perhaps, or just confusion, crossed his face. The door to the cell opened. Shinobu stood there, her face grim. Naruto, we need to talk. Naruto excused himself, leaving Kageyama to stare at the Go board. He joined Shinobu and Mitsuri in the main hall. Kanao was there too, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. The air was tense. The government has made its move, Shinobu said, holding up an official-looking scroll. This was delivered by Messenger Hawk an hour ago. It's an official decree, signed by the Prime Minister. The Demon Slayer Corps is to be disbanded and its members integrated into the Oni Buster program under the command of Colonel Takeda. All Hashira are ordered to surrender themselves to the capital for assessment. Mitsuri gasped. They can't do that. They can, and they are, Shinobu said, her voice like ice. Takeda used your display of power against us, Naruto. He painted you as a rogue element, AP. Rivate army of superhumans too powerful to be left unchecked. He's positioned himself as the only one who can control the supernatural threat. Naruto's hands clenched into fists. Takeda hadn't listened. He'd twisted the warning into a political weapon. He had made them the enemy. This creates a war on two fronts, Kanao said, her voice quiet but clear, echoing Naruto's own thoughts. Demons at night, soldiers during the day. We will be crushed between them. They were trapped. If they defied the decree, they would be branded traitors, hunted by their own government. If they complied, they would be declawed, vivisected, and neutralized, leaving Japan utterly defenseless against both Muzan and the encroaching void. Naruto looked at his wives. He saw the fire in Mitsuri's eyes, the cold fury in Shinobu's. The quiet resolve in Kanao's. They weren't afraid. They were ready to fight. But he knew a direct conflict with the government was a battle they couldn't win. Not in the long run. No, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the tension. We won't fight them, and we won't surrender. They all looked at him, confused. Takeda wants to control the supernatural, Naruto explained, his mind racing, formulating a new, audacious strategy. He wants to be the hero who tames the monsters. Fine, we'll give him a monster he can't ignore. He looked at Shinobu. That decree gives a deadline, right? A week, yes. 7 days to surrender at the capital. Good. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Naruto's face. Then we've got 7 days to give Colonel Takeda and the entire Japanese government a demonstration. We're not going to fight their soldiers. We're going to fight our war, but we're going to do it so loudly, so brightly, that they won't have a choice but to see who the real enemy is." He looked out the window, towards the distant, sprawling city of Tokyo. Muzan was still out there. The remaining upper moons were still out there. "It's time we stopped just defending," Naruto declared, his voice ringing with a newfound purpose. "It's time we went hunting." He stood with his family, a united front against the storm. They had built their home. Now, they would defend it, not just with swords and power, but with strategy, defiance, and a light so bright it would force the entire world to look. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Infinity Castle and the Three-Way War. Infinity Castle was a place that broke the laws of God and man. A dimension of impossible geometry, of staircases that led to ceilings and doors that opened into empty sky. It was Muzan Kibutsuji's sanctuary, his fortress, and his masterpiece, a shifting, endless labyrinth controlled by the Biwa-playing demon, Nakame. Here, he was king. Here, he was safe. But tonight, Muzan was not at ease. The world was changing in ways he could not control. The emergence of the Void Cult, this Amatsu Mikabashi, was a variable he despised. Their cold, nihilistic energy felt like a contamination, a rival-eyed ology that threatened his own brand of eternal, selfish tyranny. Worse, the Demon Slayer Corps, once a persistent but manageable nuisance, had become something far more dangerous. They were led by A.C. Or of Hashira, more powerful than any he had seen in centuries, spearheaded by the sun-haired anomaly, Naruto Uzumaki. The loss of 2 upper moons in a single night at the swordsmith village was not just a setback. It was an intolerable insult. And now, that same blonde-haired pest was practically banging on his door. For the past 6 days, Naruto and his family had waged a war of audacious visibility. They hadn't hidden. They had hunted. They tracked a lower moon to the outskirts of a major city and, instead of a quiet assassination, Naruto had obliterated it with a Rasenshuriken that lit up the night sky for miles. Mitsuri and Kanao had intercepted a demon trafficking ring in a port town, their battle a public spectacle of whip-like grace and flowering sword forms. Shinobu had systematica, LLY dismantled a demon-run gambling den in the heart of a metropolis, her work leaving not bodies, but a trail of paralyzed, poison-racked demons for the morning sun to claim. They were sending a message, not just to Muzan, but to the Japanese government. They were demonstrating their power and purpose on a scale that could not be ignored. Colonel Takeda's Oni Busters were left scrambling, arriving at scenes of carnage only to find the supernatural threat already neutralized by the very people they were supposed to be hunting. It was a humiliating, public display of their own inadequacy. Muzan, however, saw it as the height of arrogance. This Naruto Uzumaki was goading him, challenging him. He felt his control slipping, his absolute authority questioned. He would not tolerate it. He would end this tonight. All of it. Nakame, Muzan said, his voice a low snarl in the echoing chambers of his castle. The final preparations are made. The Ubuyashiki estate has been located. Nakime's biwa strummed a deep, resonant chord. Bring them here, Muzan commanded. All of them. And then, bring the castle to them. It is time to erase the Demon Slayer Corps from existence. At the Ubuyashiki estate, an emergency Hashira meeting was underway. Kagaya, his illness having progressed, lay upon a futon, but his voice was as calm as ever. They were discussing Naruto's strategy, the deadline for their surrender to the capital looming in less than 12 hours. It is a bold move, Naruto, Kagaya said, a faint, approving smile on his lips. You have shown the government that we are not the true threat. But you have also made an enemy of Colonel Takeda. He is a man driven by pride. Pride won't save him when the sky starts to fall, Naruto replied grimly. My only goal was to buy us time to deal with Muzan. Once he's gone. He was cut short. A deep, discordant twang echoed through the very air. It was not a sound one heard, but one felt in the bones. Naruto's head snapped up, his senses screaming. Everyone, get down. The world turned inside out. The floor beneath them vanished, replaced by a dizzying drop. The walls dissolved into a kaleidoscope of shifting shoji screens and wooden beams. One moment they were in the serene, candlelit hall of the Ubuyashiki estate, The next, they were plummeting through the impossible architecture of the Infinity Castle. Naruto reacted instantly. He grabbed Mitsuri with one arm and Shinobu with the other, twisting in midair to absorb the impact as they crashed onto a wooden platform. He created two shadow clones that snatched Kanao and a stunned Gyu Tomioka. The other Hashira, Tsunemi, Gyome, Obanai, Rengoku, and Tengen used their own incredible reflexes to break their falls, landing scattered across different levels of the shifting maze. They were separated, divided, exactly as Muzan intended. So this is it, Naruto said, his eyes scanning the endless, shifting labyrinth. He could feel him, Muzan, a colossal, malignant tumor of demonic energy at the heart of this dimension. But there was something else, too. Faint at first, but growing stronger. The cold. Naruto-kun, what's happening? Mitsuri asked, her blade already in hand. It's a trap, Shinobu said, her gaze sharp and analytical. He's separated us. Classic divide and conquer strategy. Suddenly, the platform they were on lurched. A new set of stairs connected to their level. And standing at the top was a figure that made Shinobu's blood run cold. He had rainbow-colored eyes, a perpetual, beatific smile on his face, and held a pair of razor-sharp golden fans. It was Doma, Upper Moon 2, the demon who had killed her sister. Well, what a delightful surprise. Doma chirped, his eyes crinkling. Two lovely ladies to devour. And, oh, you. His gaze fell on Shinobu. I remember you. You're little Kanae's sister, aren't you? You have the same angry look in your eyes. So cute. Shinobu's composure, the iron control she maintained at all times, shattered. A sound of pure, unadulterated rage escaped her lips, a guttural snarl that was utterly terrifying. Doma, she would have launched herself at him, a moth to a flame, exactly as he wanted. Naruto's hand on her shoulder was a steel anchor. Not yet, Shinobu, he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. He stepped in front of her, shielding her from Doma's sight. He looked at the upper moon, his blue eyes holding no anger. Only a chilling, absolute certainty. You will not lay a hand on her. You will not speak to her. Your existence ends here. Doma's smile widened. My, how protective. A big, strong man standing up for the little lady. Are you her lover? I love a tragic romance. Before Doma could launch an attack, the entire castle shuddered violently. A sound ripped through the dimension. Not the strum of a biwa, but a sickening, tearing noise, like reality itself being ripped like fabric. The cold intensified 100-fold. A fissure of pure blackness, oozing oily, void-like energy, tore open in the sky above them. From it, a wave of profound despair and nothingness washed over the castle. Muzan, from his throne room, felt it. The alien energy of the void, invading his domain. What is this? The cultists. How did they find this place? On the battlefield, everyone felt the change. The very air grew thick, charged with a power that was hostile to both demon and slayer. The wooden structures of the castle began to warp, the grain twisting into spiral patterns. Demons and slayers alike felt a psychic pressure, a deep, gnawing despair that whispered of the pointlessness of their struggle. Doma's smile faltered for the first time. What is this unpleasant feeling? It's so empty. From the black fissure, things began to fall. They were not demons. They were abominations. Creatures of impossible geometry, with too many limbs and eyes that stared into the soul and found it wanting. They were the void's vanguard. The three-way war had begun. This changes things, Naruto said grimly. His senses were a chaotic mess of demonic energy, human life force, and the horrifying anti-energy of the void. Shinobu, Mitsuri, stay close. We fight our way to the others. The battle became a desperate, swirling melee. Slayers fought demons, demons fought void abominations, and the abominations attacked everything that lived and breathed. The upper moons, beings of immense power, found their demonic arts twisting in unpredictable ways under the void's influence. Akaza's compass needle technique flickered erratically. Kokushibo's moon-breathing slashes would sometimes fizzle out, absorbed by the null energy in the air. This chaos was Naruto's element. His Sun Fox breathing, a style born from pure life energy, was the natural enemy of the void. His clones, deployed throughout the castle, acted as relays, feeding him information, allowing him to build a mental map of the shifting labyrinth and the locations of his comrades. Rengoku and Akaza are locked in battle on the East Wing. A clone's memory fed into his mind. But the void's influence is corrupting Akaza's blood art. Sanemi and Kokushibo just crossed paths. Their battle is shattering the dimension around them. Kanao is with Guillaume. They're holding off a horde of those things. He processed it all in a split second. Shinobu, he said, turning to her while simultaneously parrying. A strike from a void creature with a ki-infused arm. Doma is our target. Nothing else matters for you right now. He looked at her, his eyes blazing. I'm not going to steal your revenge. I'm going to make sure you get it. He slammed his palms together. Taiyo Kitsune no Kokyu. Senpo, Mayayanman. Sun Fox breathing. Sage art. Gracious deity gates. Golden energy erupted from the ground around Doma. A series of massive, golden torii gates slammed down from above, creating a cage of pure, solid life energy that trapped the upper moon. Doma slashed at the bars with his fans. Demon blood art. Barren hanging garden. Icy vines erupted to attack the cage, but they hissed and evaporated on contact with the golden light. My ki is the antithesis of your arts, Naruto stated. You're not going anywhere. He looked at Shinobu. Her eyes were wide, staring at the trapped demon, at the clear path Naruto had just created for her. He can't run. He can't use his ice to escape. He's all yours. Tears streamed down Shinobu's face, washing away the rage and leaving behind a cold, clear purpose. She looked at Naruto, a look of profound, silent gratitude, before turning to her nemesis. She didn't have to worry about his tricks, his escape routes, his ice clones. She just had to administer the final dose. Insect breathing, dance of the dragonfly, compound eye hexa sting, she whispered, a new, custom-made technique for this very moment. She became a purple blur, her blade striking Doma 6 times in the blink of an eye, injecting a massive, complex cocktail of wisteria poison-designed tea. Overwhelm his regenerative abilities completely. Doma laughed, even as his skin began to crack and dissolve. Amazing. To think you hated me so much. I'm actually feeling something. It's wonderful. Shinobu landed, her back to him. As he crumbled into dust, his final, insane words echoing in the chaos. She stood there, trembling, the weight of a lifetime of rage finally lifting. Naruto's hand came to rest on her shoulder again. A silent, steadying presence. But there was no time to rest. The castle was screaming, the void's influence spreading. The very structure began to break apart, not just shifting, but collapsing. Kanao. Naruto yelled into the chaos, his senses reaching for her. Where are you? He felt her energy signature flare. She was in trouble. He left Shinobu with Mitsuri and rocketed in Kanao's direction, moving through the disintegrating dimension with his phenomenal speed. He found her and Guillaume, the stone Hashira, back to back, surrounded by a legion of void cult ISTs who had somehow entered the castle through the fissure. They were being led by a zealot wielding one of the staffs of null energy. Kanao was fighting with a ferocity Naruto had never seen, her FL. Were breathing a whirlwind of lethal grace, but they were being overwhelmed. Naruto arrived like a thunderbolt. He didn't waste time with subtlety. He created a dozen clones, who formed a defensive perimeter. Then, he and the real Naruto entered a familiar stance. Futon. Rasenshuriken. 2 massive, shrieking wind shuriken ripped through the cultist ranks, their storm of microscopic blades not Jew Saint killing the humans but disrupting the null energy they wielded, causing a chain reaction that disintegrated their artifacts. It was brutal, efficient, and it cleared the field in seconds. Guillaume nodded, tears streaming from his sightless eyes. Namu Amida Butsu, a necessary slaughter. Well done, Uzumaki-san. Kanao ran to Naruto, her eyes wide with relief. He pulled her into a quick, fierce hug. You're okay. I am now, she whispered, her voice steady despite the chaos. She had not panicked. She had held the line. The reunion was cut short as a new figure landed before them. A demon with 6 eyes, long black hair, and a presence so immense it dwarfed even Doma's. Kokushibo. Upper Moon 1. Sanemi lay wounded a short distance away, clutching a grievous sword wound. The one with the sun-colored hair, Kokushibo said. His voice a deep, ancient monotone. His 6 eyes focused on Naruto, not with malice, but with a warrior's appraisal. Your energy, it is not of the sun, yet it burns as brightly. How intriguing. He drew his flesh-like sword. Show me your style. Naruto pushed Kanao and the wounded Tsunemi behind him. Get him out of here, he told her. This one is mine. The duel was legendary, if brief. Moon breathing versus Sun Fox breathing. The calculated, perfected forms of a centuries-old swordsman against the fluid, instinctual, and overwhelmingly powerful style of a reborn sage. Kokushibo's slashes were crescents of deadly energy that seemed to bend space. Naruto's movements were a dance of explosive force and impossible redirection. Their blades clashed, and dimension itself seemed to groan under the strain. It was a battle of philosophies. Kokushibo, the man who gave up his humanity for the perfect, eternal blade. Naruto, the man who used his power to protect the messy, imperfect, and vibrant life around him. Naruto couldn't win. Not yet. Kokushibo was the accumulation of 400 years of combat experience. But Naruto didn't need to win. He just needed to survive. He was faster. His reactions amplified by his sage-like senses, allowing him to dodge and parry attacks that should have been indefensible. Their duel was interrupted as the castle gave a final, agonizing groan. Muzan, in a desperate bid to regain control, was trying to eject everyone. But the void's influence had corrupted the castle's core. Instead of collapsing into the real world, the infinity castle began to collapse inward. The fissure in the sky widened, becoming a swirling vortex of absolute blackness. It began to pull everything in: debris, demons, slayers. Naruto saw Muzan for the first time. A distant figure in a white suit, his body smoking and regenerating from a battle with the other Hashira. Muzan's red, plum-like eyes met Naruto's, and the hatred in them was a physical force. But even that hatred was dwarfed by the fear as the vortex began to pull him, too. Muzan roared in fury and managed to tear himself free, using Nakime's power to expel himself into the real world just as dawn was breaking. But for everyone else, it was too late. Naruto, his family, and the surviving slayers were caught in the inexorable pull. The world dissolved into a nauseating spiral of non-colors and screaming silence. They were being pulled into the heart of the void. And in the center of that swirling abyss of nothing, a form began to coalesce. An avatar of Amatsu Mikabashi. It was a being of impossible angles. A living blind spot in reality, a creature made of the spaces between the stars. Its presence was a psychic scream that promised an end to all things. They were trapped. The king of demons had escaped, but they had fallen into the court of the god of nothing. Chapter 6 End.